Hello, this is Jeremy, and you're watching Fresh Takes with Dr. Wagner, where we look at the health news and offer up a fresh take. Giving us that fresh take is, of course, Dr. Mark Wagner. Mark, last week we had a little diet feud unfold in the news via the usual social media channels. We had Jillian Michaels of Biggest Loser TV show from a while ago. She's been around. In a video segment and also, I think, a blog post for Women's Health, talked about how the keto diet is not good for you. She said you're missing out on a lot of nutrients, and she had some other general commentary. Al Roker responded on the Today Show with a personal, took it a little bit personally, basically saying, hey, different things work for different people, and that keto works for him. Mark, what's your take on all that?
Yeah, I think, I don't think Jillian's comments were all that helpful because they were so dismissive and unnuanced. I agree with her on some things, but I disagreed with her approach and style. I mean, first of all, she basically defined the keto diet right off the bat as all fat and animal protein, which isn't true. It's a straw man argument, one of those things where you talk about something in the worst possible way and then knock it down because it's easy to knock down. If to say that the keto diet these days is all fat and animal protein is to assume that we've learned nothing about the keto diet and its implementation since the 1920s when it was first introduced as one of the most successful treatments for seizure disorders of the day before barbiturates were invented. So in fact, and there are other problems with it, to say that it's all fat and animal protein, because you can't actually even stay in ketosis if you eat a lot of protein, animal or plant-based, because the protein will cause gluconeogenesis. Basically, protein will be converted into glucose, and boom, you're out of ketosis. So it's not a high-protein diet, animal protein or otherwise. It is a high-fat diet, but all fats are not created equal. I think there's been enough discussion in this country about that by now that people should be aware of that, but they may not be. The other thing that I didn't like about Jillian's take was that she said twice she actually pointed to herself and used herself as an example of what you should do. She said, "I eat carbs all the time, and look at me, picture of health." And she does that twice throughout her take on not just the keto, but on a number of things. And so that's really another logical fallacy because it's a false inference. It doesn't take into account complexity at all. It doesn't take into account genetics, the differences in genetics in people, the differences in their microbiomes, the differences in their digestive health, the differences in the amount of stress they might be under, their allostatic load, it's called, their personalities, differences in their insulin resistance profiles, differences in their disease profiles that are relevant, such as a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or seizure disorder, all of which are good ways all of which lend themselves to medical at least consideration of well-instituted keto diet. So again, it was very dismissive. It was an excellent ploy if what you're looking for is to create controversy and therefore get more views. So from a business standpoint, it's awesome for Jillian and Women's Health magazine to oversimplify the beautiful complexity of biology and then shove it in people's faces so that they feel like it's conflicting with their direct lived experience, which it does, and therefore then they engage and say, hey, that's not right, it worked for me, and blah, blah, blah. So this is a typical tactic. Oversimplification is a typical tactic on social media that politicians use all the time to great effect because there really is no such thing as bad publicity. So if you oversimplify something as a politician and it outrages a bunch of people, then you're just going to get more attention. We see that all the time. So this is kind of like that, only in the health space. Now, there are a lot of things I agree with in terms of cautionary tales with keto. Keto can be implemented badly. It can be implemented too quickly and cause all kinds of side effects. It can be implemented without knowledge of what you're doing. Like you need to, especially in the early phases when your insulin is dropping, you need to be adding more salt to your diet. Otherwise, because you're going to be diuresing a lot in the beginning, you're going to be losing salt. Your electrolytes can get all screwed up. You can get palpitations, problems. So you do kind of need to know what you're doing, especially if you're doing a rapid induction. It can cause problems with sleep, thyroid disorders, and then one of the problems still is that most people gravitate to sort of comfort foods for it, like bad fats, and then they sabotage their keto even just by eating too much protein. They don't understand that it's about the fat and the starchy and sugary carb reduction. It's not about protein. I mean, it's a very moderate to even lowish protein to really stay in ketosis. So there's just a lot of misunderstanding. And the fact that, none of that was mentioned, I think is unfortunate, because I think Jillian Michaels and Women's Health magazine missed an opportunity to highlight the beautiful complexity of biology. And that's sad, because I think we don't need more rants in this country. What we need is more thoughtfulness. But people want more followers, so rants are good. But let me offer some alternatives. If you've read the End of Alzheimer's by Dr. Dale Bredesen, for brain health, especially if you're already in cognitive decline, that's one of those medical indications for really looking closely at the keto diet. But this isn't just any keto diet. This isn't, loads of butter and bacon. And this is a very veggie-heavy diet, because it turns out that non-starchy veggies do not raise your blood sugar. And healthy fats like olive oils and nuts and seeds are great fat sources, and avocados and things like that. So it doesn't have to be even saturated fat heavy, you see. It just needs to be devoid of a lot of refined oils, and for people with ApoE4 genetics, which are typically those people most suffering from cognitive decline, those are the saturated fat sensitive people. Those are the ones who should be eating a lower saturated fat, so less animal protein, if you will, only because animal protein, land-based animal protein, comes with saturated fat. And I think that's an important distinction, land-based versus marine-based animals. Because land-based animals need stiffer fats to hold up their membranes against gravity. So they're going to have these stiffer, longer chain saturated fats, whereas the marine animals need to be flexible. So their membranes are going to be made out of these long chain polyunsaturated fats that we know of as omega-3s, DHA and EPA in particular, which are profoundly beneficial for brain health. So there are different ways to do the keto diet, is what I'm saying, and some of them are quite healthy and sustainable, unlike the straw man that Jillian Michaels set up. Now, just on a personal note, I tried the keto diet and I implemented it badly. It was years ago when I didn't know as much as I do about it now. And I got into problems with salt and electrolyte issues and had some palpitations. And I had massive weight loss, which I don't need. I'm a skinny guy. All I was trying to do was improve my brain function. So instead, let me talk about something that was another nuance and a wrinkle that was not mentioned, is fasting. Now, if you do intermittent fasting, you can have the best of both worlds, because you can actually have cyclic periods of ketosis that allow your brain to really have an alternative fuel source when it's not handling glucose well, which is the case in most cases of cognitive decline. So intermittent fasting gives you cyclic periods of ketosis, and then you don't have to carbohydrate restrict during the remaining 8 hours of the day that you actually are feeding or eating. So that's an amazing thing. So if you fast from 6 p.m., let's say, well, let me just tell you my program, and I've written about this extensively on other social media channels, and so I'm just going to kind of click in here and look at this for all of our sake. So so Dr. Bredesen basically says a great way to give yourself Alzheimer's is to consistently fail to give yourself a long enough break between dinner and breakfast, because brain cells don't do glucose burning and house cleaning at the same time. So in other words, you can't have your cake and clean up too unless you pause to do the dishes. And then Bredesen recommends a 12-hour overnight fast for everyone and a 14 to 16-hour fast for ApoE4 carriers like myself. So I personally opt for 16 hours. And what it looks like for me, and the reason I do this is because fasting produces brain fuel molecules called ketones, which we've been talking about. And these are produced from onboard stores of fat or from dietary fat, as long as it's consumed without any carbs or protein. So you can eat fat while fasting without disrupting the fasting state, metabolically speaking. MCT oil is one way to do that because it converts especially well into ketones, and I often use it to keep my energy up and from getting hangry in those last few hours of the fast. So after 16 hours, then I break my fast by backloading whole food carbohydrates like lentils, sweet potatoes, and berries. You can see these are healthy carbohydrates. This is not low carbohydrate, but I got some ketosis in already. So this gives me the best of both worlds. There's cyclic periods of nutritional ketosis without the typical low carb diet because I don't want to lose weight. I don't want to lose muscular strength or glycolytic bursts of power. I don't want to mess up my thyroid. So I don't restrict total carbs. I time my carbs and I manage the quality of my carbs, whole foods, not mouthfuls of milled carbohydrates or sugars. And in fact, this protocol has done more to boost my brain power between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. than any single thing I've ever done. And let me break it down to you just step by step so you understand how easy this is. So I stop eating at 6 p.m. the night before. I get up at 6 a.m. the next morning and I make my own version of bulletproof coffee with a tablespoon of MCT oil and nothing else. So no butter, no long chain saturated fats. I don't eat breakfast then until 10 or 11 a.m. I do listen to my body. If I get hungry, I eat. But generally, the MCT oil keeps me going until about 10. And then, so from 6 p.m. yesterday until 10 a.m. today is 16 hours. And that's totally doable because you slept through half of it. And then you got to drink bulletproof coffee the other half. I mean, what's not to love there? Now, you should always consult your physician. Again, I'll throw the nuance out there that Jillian didn't have time for, didn't make time for. Always consult your physician, your doctor, to see if this kind of fasting is right for you. I mean, because it's also not right for everybody. Diabetics, for example, shouldn't do this without supervision or medication adjustments, right? So again, biology is beautifully complex. We should never miss the opportunity to highlight that. We don't want to reduce ourselves to molecular machines that are as simple as amoeba or something and say, or point to ourselves because we got great genetics and a great microbiome and say, hey, it works for me, balanced diet works for me, or overgeneralize. I mean, generalization is the enemy of clarity. I mean, what does it even mean to eat a balanced diet? People don't even know what it means, right? So it's just not helpful to be dismissive and to lead without nuance with the express aim to create controversy and get more views. I disapprove of that. I want to keep this short so that people can get through it. So I don't have anything more to say. That's it.
That's great. That's great. Appreciate it. I just had one note in it, and you actually hit on it already. I was just going to say, it seems to me in talking about variance of diet and different studies, our last one was ranking different diets. It seems to me the variance between the diet almost is a secondary order importance than the variance of the people doing the diets. And I think that's what you just mentioned. Everybody's different, and the variability from individual to individual is so great that there is probably no generalization. So I was going to ask that question, but I think I just summarized what you're getting at. So wrap it up.
All right. Thanks, Jer. That was great.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. Till next time.
Till next time.